Welcome to Breaking the Couch, a weekly conversation demystifying what happens in and behind the therapy scene to support your healing journey. We're your hosts.
I'm Dr. Dowdson, a licensed clinical professional counselor, a certified school psychologist, and a trauma specialist with Playfully Psyched.
And I'm Dr. Joharchi with Soft Art Psychology, a licensed clinical psychologist.
We're here aiming to provide you with mental health tools to address the cycle of generational trauma across the age span, from infancy and childhood to adulthood.
For more information, visit our Instagram page at Breaking the Couch or our website, breakingthecouch.com. While we hope you love listening to and learning from our podcast, it's not a substitute for a relationship with a licensed mental health professional. We're back this week, and we are so grateful to have Miss Jila Behnad join us. This is a just wonderful and beautiful, kind provider who we know from, of course. Yeah, we know you from California. We got a chance to reach out, and we've done a little bit of work together, but mostly I just know that sometimes some parents will reach out to you in some guidance. And I've heard from them, and I know that you're doing really kind, compassionate work. So for the most part, this is just a really, really nice, compassionate provider that we want you all Breaking the Couch to get a chance to hear from. And Ms. Behnad is okay with sharing a little bit about immigrant experiences in the U.S. And we'd just love to hear from you. Welcome.
Thank you so much for inviting me.
You're so welcome.
Yeah, thank you. And we're honored to have you and just sharing these experiences. And I must admit that I don't know a whole lot of those nuances and details about, immigrant experiences. So I think this will be so helpful for myself as a clinician, as a human, and for our listeners and our patients alike. So thank you.
Thank you. It's interesting what you say, because I talk about my immigration experience a lot with people, with non-immigrants, and almost all the time they can relate to my experience, even they are not immigrants. So let's see what happens today.
I can imagine, especially with the marginalization that exists in the United States in general. I can imagine that there's overlap.
So my story is that I immigrated to the U.S. in 1998 with my husband, and I was pregnant when I moved here. So new life, new baby, and new marriage, everything was new. And I was very excited that we were going to build our home in a new country. I didn't know what I'm going through. Just arrived to the U.S. the first day, I felt lost, that what's happening, who am I, why people treat me this way. And it was very different with the experience my husband had, because English was his first language. He grown up in England and US, even we both are from Iran, and we met there, but he had a lot of experience before me, so he was very familiar with the culture. And I think language was my biggest barrier when I came to the US. So after I had my baby, I saw my first therapist, because my physician noticed that I'm depressed. So she asked me to take medicine and see a therapist. And that was the motivation I actually came to this field, because when I was in Iran, I was a literature teacher, and I thought I'm fine. But so I started my own therapy, and my amazing therapist, encouraged me to go back to school and study psychology. What I learned from that experience later, I learned that I don't think I was depressed. I think I was grieving. I didn't understand. I didn't know anything about grief. And that's why I'm very interested to learn more about immigration and grief. And I learned that immigration has different stages. Stage one is honeymoon. Like, people are excited that they are in a new place. Probably it's better than their own country. It's safe. Everything is exciting. And gradually they face with reality. Wow, this is tough, and I have to face with many challenges. They start to get anxious, depressed, and after a while, hopefully they go to acceptance and acculturation. So it's very similar to the stages of grief. When we lose someone, we are shocked. We don't know what's happening. We are in denial. We may get angry and anxious. We go to depression. Gradually, we go to acceptance. So knowing these two stages was amazing for me, that, wow, immigration is the biggest probably grief that people experience in their life, because we don't lose just our loved one. We lose our culture, language, family, friends, and more than anything, we lose our identity. Because when I came here, I didn't know who I am. In Iran, I felt I'm successful, I'm confident, I know people, I know when I walk in at the street, I know where I'm going, I know how to react to people. And here, I just was someone who has zero confidence and lost and doesn't know anything, doesn't know how to talk, doesn't know how to behave. I felt everything I'm doing, I'm judged. And the way people react to me is, sometimes I felt invisible, and sometimes I felt so insecure. I wanted just to say, hey, I'm safe. I don't know, but I'm okay. Like, I'm a good person. So that's what I hear from many immigrants. So when I started my practice, most of my clients are immigrants from different cultures. And when I talk about grief in immigration and their stages, nobody told me so far that, no, I cannot relate to that. Immigrants, children of immigrants, or even people who are not immigrants, but they move from one city to another city, one state to another state, even one neighborhood to another neighborhood, they all can relate to this grief. And I feel this is so important, because when we name it, we know how to deal with it. Like with my depression, I felt I judged myself so much that what's wrong with me? I mean, I have a good life, I have a healthy baby, I'm living in the US, I have freedom. What's wrong with me that I cannot enjoy this life? But when I say, wow, that was grief, or I'm grieving, I'm in what stage, like at this stage of grief. So it just calmed my system down, that, okay, now go and learn how to deal with this grief. And that's a big part of my practice with people. Like and I hear about grief, like after divorce, many after moving or changing their job. And I always amazed that there are so many research, and there are so many people that are working on mental health, but I feel grief is still haven't got enough attention in this field.
Absolutely.
I like that you've highlighted, it's one of the things that I'm hearing is highlighting that grief isn't just about death, it's loss, right? The things that you lost through your immigration process. And when you first said that you were excited, to move here and have a baby, my thought was like, oh my gosh, that is a major life transition times two, because you were having a baby at the time, right? And so while those are exciting things, I wasn't surprised when the next sentence was like, and they told me I need to see a therapist, right? Because I'm just thinking the support system, family, whatever that looked like for you, whether great or not so great, was going to be drastically different for you here in the US, right? And those feelings of loss would be compounded by the fact that there is this new life that you're taking care of, but also this new life you're trying to build in a place that's so unfamiliar.
Exactly, yeah.
And so how do they find and learn about this? Like, what can we do to help them either prepare for the experience of grief or loss when they're immigrating? Or are there networks that people can tap into when they first move here or when they first immigrate somewhere?
Yeah, that's a great question. Unfortunately, I couldn't find good resources. I know different communities, they have their own support network, but it's not enough. And something it's so, like all the researchers mentioned, it's so important that after immigration you have support group. So that has a huge effect of someone who like immigrate by themselves or they know someone in the new country. So that's why I started to just think about Raha Foundation, that maybe I can be that person that I really needed years ago and I couldn't find it. So that's my hope. I feel I want to be the glue of our community, not just for Iranian, for anyone that who feel lonely, because that's the hardest in grief that you feel. Even I was married, but in my own grief, I felt lonely because my husband could really connect with my experience. Our experiences were so different. And now after all these years, we talk and I noticed that he had his own grief. It was not that everything was okay with him, but we know it's like grief that it's so unique. Everyone experienced it in a different way. So we didn't know that we both were grieving in a different way. And now, like after this movement in Iran, I learned actually much more about this grief, that we are in a safe country. We feel very privileged and we feel we have many things that our people in our own country in Iran don't have it. So that's a grief that I feel I deal with it daily, that every day I wake up, I just think about my family, my people, like my friends and what's happening at home. And when you hear bad news, when you hear that they are not okay, it really hits hard. And you feel guilty, you have like survival guilt, and you get so anxious that what can I do? And then you go out and you notice nobody even knows about your experience. You cannot talk to people, you go to work and everything is okay, you turn on the TV, there is no news. And I noticed this anger in myself and with many other Iranian that, look, what's happening? Why nobody talk about what's happening in Iran? They are killing kids. Every day they are torturing people just for very, very little. Like they just want freedom. That's it. They want to dress up the way they want. This is not too much, but we are so lonely in this experience here, and. I think that's another part that we need to learn as an immigrant, that how to deal with this type of grief. When you really have a bad experience or you feel unsafe, can you give yourself permission for grief? Because the other part of me was that shame on you. People are dying in Iran and you are anxious, or you feel you don't want to work, or like you are the lucky one that you have everything. But again, I had to remind myself that just open some room for grief, and this is not easy.
It's not. Yeah, it made me think of just the parallels to kind of traditional grief when there's a death. You talked about survivor's guilt, but then you also talked about the frustration and the anger that everyone is just walking around or living their lives. And you're like, why aren't you feeling this? Or why am I feeling this alone? Why don't people know about this? And we can experience that, when someone dies as well. And like you said earlier, like when I've lived all over the country almost, but when I moved to Northern California, it was the worst experience of my life, partially because of that isolation piece. And the culture was different. The cost of living made it hard. The language was the same, but the nuance to the language was very different for me. I grew up in a place where I was like Black people were everywhere, and it was what we call like Black Mecca. Like we felt safe and all these things. In Northern California is not like that. And I did not ever feel safe there, and I couldn't afford things. It was just so many things. But to the surface, right, California has a reputation of being liberal and progressive, and people think it's so safe and there's no racism and there's no all of these things. And I'm like, I'm here suffering. Like I can barely go to work, and you all are smiling around talking about, oh, but the weather's so great. I'm like, it's not. So I can relate to that. And I think that people can relate to that. Like you said, even if you are moving to a different neighborhood, sometimes you can experience those things, but how heavy it feels when you're in it by yourself, or you're in it in a different way than people. It feels so isolating.
Right. Yeah.
Mm.
So what you are doing, I think, is amazing, that you give this voice to me, and people are able to hear our stories, and I'm sure many of them, they can relate to our experience, and if not, at least they are curious about their friends and other people can ask about their experience. Because I had this feeling that people like ask me that, wow, you must be very excited you moved to the US, and I said, yes. Well,
That loaded question. It's like, which also makes you feel like you're not allowed to have the negative or the hurt feelings about the move
exactly.
too. People focus so much on like, well, it's better or it's good, or and it's that that duality of emotion that we're always talking about on this in this podcast and just in life and with our patients, that it's yes and not either or, right? And so it's like, yes, I'm excited that I moved here, and I'm lonely, I'm sad, I feel guilty, I'm scared, I'm alone, right? It's hard. It's and so often people do the and or feels like it erases your experience and actually makes it even much harder for you to allow yourself to experience the grief and work through it.
I love that.
Yeah.
That's very important. And if we can say that to ourselves too, that yes, I'm grateful and I'm grief too. So it's both are real.
Yeah, absolutely. And it makes me think, and I don't know if you've had this with some of your like your clients or the people that you work with, but it just made me think about, I wonder what it's like in so you had your like husband and it was a baby, but I wonder people who move here with a like slightly older child who is then also experiencing cultural loss and all the feelings that come along with moving different place. And then as the parent, you're holding your grief and figuring that out for yourself. You have a spouse that's going through their own version of it, and then you have a child that's also feeling the loss in a different way than a baby would feel, which a baby will feel it too. But I wonder if that comes up for you in your work at all.
A lot, and for myself too, because I feel the biggest or the hardest part of immigration for me was parenting. It was a really important thing for me. I have two boys, and I always wanted to be a mom since I was a child. I wanted to have a child. So parenting was a huge part of my personality or my wish. And when I came here, and even when he was a baby, I just felt, I don't know how to do this. I know this is the issue that all the parents have, but for me, it's not having support from families, but also the fear of, am I doing the right thing? Like even since my kids were in kindergarten, I was so scared of not knowing what's happening at the school. Am I doing right? Should I get involved? Should I say no? How to set boundaries? Like the boundary in my family is so different than here. And I hear this all the time. Should I let them to have a sleepover? Should I let them to go to the party, or field trip is free? Like, yeah, it's safe or not? Like very simple questions that it's all for us. It's huge.
Yeah.
We don't know how. We want to do our best, but we really don't know what's the right thing to do. And you have to learn with your child. I hear from especially my older son, that he says, I had to teach a lot. I have to teach you and dad a lot. Like I have to come, and I think, or I hope we were very open, but we had to ask him about every little thing, about all the cultures at the school. What does it mean? What do you do? And we had to make the decision, is it the right thing to do or not? And it was a huge responsibility on his shoulder. As a kid, he has to teach his parents what's the right thing or not.
Yeah, as he was learning it, he's also ushering you into it, teaching you. And so he was in those two roles. Absolutely. It also just made me think about like when we say, culture is it's a big thing, but it's also very nuanced. And we go into different scenarios and situations, and each of those situations have culture, right? And so like schools have a culture. And while there is a culture of like American schools, right? There's also each school has its own culture. Each type of school has its own culture, right? And so it's all of these nuanced things that you're shifting and constantly navigating. And like you said, you would still have some of those things, back in your like home country. At the same time, you would have had the support of friends and family and people to help
Community,
you.
uncles.
That you don't have when you they're not nearby. And so it adds another layer of, like you said, a lot of new parents, first-time parents, seasoned parents have these questions, but they also sometimes have community and family to help them through that. And they can observe, and they've seen their nieces or nephews or whatever go through the process. But you didn't have that.
That's so true. Yeah. Just a small example is celebrating Christmas. So that was a huge issue in our family every year. Like we were struggling that, is it okay? We have to do it? No, this is not. But how about our kids? They go to school and they talk about their Christmas gifts, and they talk about so that was every year we had to sit down with my husband and had all this discussion again and again. Okay, they are older. Maybe this year is okay. Oh, no, they still want it. Or should we say no? Should we say yes?
Wow, that's a good example. And especially think about I hope, I don't know, I hope in a lot of places here, families and schools are better approaching holidays, right? As generations have been more vocal about how harmful it is to like just solely focus on Christmas or solely focus on one thing. But I remember growing up how we weren't always that kind to people who didn't celebrate, like who, I grew up in a place that had a few different like religions and things like that. And so some of them don't celebrate Christmas or other holidays. And then some of their parents were immigrants. And so like they didn't celebrate certain things because it just wasn't, there's just like American holidays that nobody else celebrates. And we would, think they're weird and like, what do you mean you don't do this at home? And I can see that. I could see that when I got as an older child, but like when you're elementary school, you don't see that if your parents or your community isn't talking about ways to be open and curious about other people's cultures and environments. And so I think about one of my classmates often actually, and just like how isolated he must have felt, because he was like our first introduction to someone who didn't celebrate any holidays. And so like he would often be left out, like he would have to go to the office and just like was completely isolated whenever because the classroom would still have a Christmas party, and the classroom would have a Thanksgiving celebration, and the classroom would have all these things. And so he was literally have to be sent out of the classroom while we celebrated. And that's horrible to do to a child,
Instead of flipping it and having the classroom be inclusive and thinking of great ways to celebrate him or celebrate a variety of ways that we can sort of include children, but to have the parents and the child isolated is a great grief. Yeah.
Yeah. Why do we need to
I know.
celebrate those things at all in school?
I know. And I like to think that it gets easier these days too, but sometimes I'll hear from like teen clients or whatever that people are still mean and leaving people out. And I'm like, oh my gosh, it's still totally happening. Yeah.
I feel they learn how to be mean, that they explain that, no, I didn't mean it.
Yes. That's like the newer way to.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Didn't mean it. And that's where we come in to teach about intent versus impact. Right? That's where we say it's, oh, you know, and I always say, well, we go back to the basics, because when a 3-year-old is learning to that what they did was harmful, right? That they like pushed someone over on accident because they were running to, I don't know, get a toy on the playground or something, and they knocked over a friend. A lot of times they might be like, oh, but I didn't mean to. We're still like, right, but look, this child is crying. They're still hurt, right? So you're not in trouble because you did it on purpose, but your friend is really sad or they're really hurt. And so we want to make sure that they're okay, right? Because it's, you didn't intend for them, but let's look at to see that you did.
Exactly.
Okay. Let's do something about the fact that you did hurt them and move on, right? And so that's where that becomes important. I feel like we teach it in really early childhood, and then it goes away at some point somehow in like middle childhood, and then we will be like late teens and adults be like, oh, impact. So we just need to have the continuum.
Yeah.
You know, like
I think this is so important. What you are saying is so important in many different aspects, because I remember, I think I mentioned that shame, that these people are really nice. Even they said something like it was microaggression. I just felt, I know these people, they have good hearts and they are really nice. They say something about my accent or food I eat or my culture. I shouldn't be upset because they don't mean it. And I learned this from my kids, because they used to come back from school. They tell me a story which was really heartbreaking. And I said, wow, this is not right. And they keep, Mom, but I know this child. They're so nice. Don't do anything. Don't talk to the teacher. Don't, like, no action, because I know them. They're really nice, but it still hurts. And they don't give that permission to themselves that, yes, it hurts. It's painful.
yeah,
Even it was not intention, but yeah.
it's painful. And then it's sad that children like encode that and like oh, I can, you know, I can't say they're nice. And I'll find myself with adults sometimes talking about, well, what does nice mean? Like, let's break it down then, right? Would you call someone nice if you like didn't know them well? Would you call them nice if they're hurting people? Well, no. Were you hurt by this? Well, yes. So was it nice? Right? Because we're looking at intent. You're looking at their intent to say, hey, they didn't mean to hurt me. And then I think about, well, then how, if this person is nice and they intend to do good, right? And they don't know they're doing harm or they're hurting people, how will they ever learn that they're hurting people if we don't say anything because we don't want to, because we want to focus on their intent, right?
Yes.
And like, so it's a learning opportunity, right? And we robbing people of a learning opportunity by not saying, hey, I know you meant well, but that was hurtful. Or hey, I know you meant well, I know you weren't trying to hurt me, but this is a better way to say this thing. Or this is a better way to think about the situation so that you don't, you know, hurt someone's feelings, or, you know, because you can paint it for them like, I know you mean well, I know that you don't mean to hurt me, you are a good person. We can sugarcoat all those things. And also, because I know you're a good person, I know you're going to want to hear how you hurt me.
Exactly. Yeah, I love that. That's so great. I was thinking about myself that if I do this to someone who I feel we are close, we are friends, and they don't tell me, even it hurts more. That didn't feel safe with me. Why you didn't tell me that I said something?
Yes.
Yeah.
Sheila, you just hit it, right? You nailed it, because it made me think of the reverse side, right? If you think this person is so nice, what is the barrier to you telling them what happened? If you think they mean well, if you think you're safe with them, what's the harm? So it's like, do you not feel safe with them? Are you worried that something, you know? So like kind of exploring that. And you're right, it hurts more when we find out, like, especially when people wait a long time and they'll say like, well, you did 5 years ago. It's like, wait a minute, you've been holding on to this for 5 years. I hurt you that badly that like 5 years later you're thinking about it and you didn't tell me. Like, that's hurtful because I didn't mean to hurt you, or, you know, opening that communication can be so helpful on everybody's part. Yeah. It's interesting how we're talking a lot about immigration and the grief and losses that experience for that, but we can apply this in so many areas of our lives and situations too.
Yeah.
Kind of bridging that gap of how similar the lived experience, like the human experience, can be in some ways. It's pretty powerful.
It is. Yeah, that's what I when we started, like I said, you said I'm not immigrant, and I don't know if I can relate to this. I think that's a experience. You don't need to be. Yeah, you don't need to be immigrant. What we experience in this, it's so common in many different changes in our life.
Absolutely. You've done a really good job of illustrating that too. Just the way that the stories you've told so far, and just got my mind going, about different scenarios and situations that are so similar. Even just like I said, starting off with, you can move from a different neighborhood. I grew up in an area where there's there are different neighborhoods that have different cultures, but if you know anything about like East Coast, what we call the DMV, Maryland, DC, Virginia area, which is really like central Maryland, DC, and Northern Virginia. From Baltimore, which is like hitting the top of Central Maryland, to DC is about an hour's drive. Okay, so not that far. The culture shift, so different. Complete, like the accent is different. You can clearly hear when someone's from Baltimore versus DC. How they dress, how they talk, their value, like so many things are different, and it's only an hour apart in a drive, right? And there's like friendly rivalry. Like you can't tell someone who's from DC, oh, you're from Baltimore, or it's a whole thing. And notice I also said like Central Maryland, because we also don't like claim some of like the Outer Banks, and we don't claim like Southern Maryland, because it's just the experience, the lived experiences are so different. Like you have to go from rural to city based, and so when you have families that have children that move from one place to the next, there's usually a lot of struggles in like school and things, because they don't realize that your child is going through a culture shock.
Wow.
Yeah.
I'm so grateful you shared this story with us. I'm thinking that many people in the US, they move from one neighborhood to another. So that's a good tool for me to ask them how was their experience, because that way they can relate to my experience.
Yeah.
I like that.
That's
a good point.
Absolutely. It's really good.
And I can't wait to share this video with just like people who I know who haven't really been able to understand or put into words, because I think you were so courageous to say this is how we've been feeling and how things have been going, and no one's noticing, and it feels very lonely. So not only do I appreciate that for me personally, but I also can't wait to share that with people who don't really like know how to put it into words, but you kind of reflected, here's the experiences of grief, and then here's also how it can come back up with a new trauma of not being seen, and that's not normal, but like, what's the word? Like, it's to be expected. It's something that common. It's something that you can expect. So thanks for normalizing that. Really, I think that was super brave. I appreciate you.
Me too. Absolutely. Okay, well, I guess I will wrap us up a little bit, summarize some of the things that I got from here. There's so much, and so let's see what I got. So you talked a little bit about the stages of immigration, and really was able to parallel that against the similarities for stages of grief, and that really immigrating is a grief and loss experience, and so many nuances to that. You talked about how people can experience an identity development shift, right? When they have immigrated or moved to a different place that isn't always contextualized into language or conceptualized in that way. So that can be really helpful. You talked about especially when there are language barriers, language differences, and we kind of threw in like, even if it's the same language sometimes, but a different way of using that language can kind of throw you off, or a different version of the language. Like for us, like AAVE, African American Vernacular English versus like, for typical American English can be very different if you go to a place and people are speaking one way. We talked about feeling invisible in the process and the added frustration and grief and emotions that come with the fact that other people aren't aware of what you're going through, aren't aware of what's happening in the place where you left, just are oblivious. Yeah. It's not publicized in the same way. You highlighted some of the struggles for children of immigrants and how they navigate space differently than their parents, and sometimes have an extra burden or responsibility to help their parents navigate all those different situations. And we talked about how whether immigrating from a different country or down the street in a different zip code, there can be similarities that occur in this grief process in ways that people can relate to one another. Did I miss anything? Anybody?
No. Thank you so much.
That was that was a beautiful summary. And then we'll be sure to put Raha Foundation, out there for folks too.
Yeah. Are there any other places you'd like, if people wanted to reach out to you? Do you have any social media handles or anything that you wanted to share on the podcast?
Thank you so much. I'm avoiding social media for it's a while, but my website is my first name and last name, jilabehnad.com, if they need to contact me. And also rahafoundation.org is an organization that I started. So I'm very proud of this group of people we have about 800 Farsi-speaking therapists in our organization. So that's
wow, that's amazing. That is so
I think
impressive.
it's the biggest directory in the world, but
wow, that is so amazing. Okay, we will definitely make sure that goes in the show notes so people can reach out to you. And then of course we're on Instagram at Breaking the Couch. People want to learn more, want to tag us in their stories, visit our website, breakingthecouch.com. If there are ever any books, we put those in our show notes as well, so you can visit the bookshop and help save struggling local bookstores. And you can always send us a voicemail if people are still using that as a avenue through Anchor or Spotify, one of those places. So until next time.
If you are looking for a therapist for yourself or your child, you can visit our websites, playfullypsych.com or softheartpsychology.com.
We appreciate you joining us this week and can't wait till there's another opportunity to jump on the couch with you next week.